Hello.
How are you? Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to get started in just one moment here, almost 1 o'clock. And so, feel free to just start putting in
Hello.
questions in the chat that you have, and we'll get started in
Hello.
just a moment here. All right, let's get going.
Hello. No.
Hello there, everybody. Welcome to the Story Doctor. Yes, I am your Story Doctor today. I have Beth here with me as well. Hey, Beth, how are you?
I'm terrific. How are you?
Fantastic. So, here in my little doctor laboratory, patient room, however you want to put it, we will be answering your questions. So, feel free to go ahead and type your questions into the chat. And I can see you out there on YouTube as well. Hopefully, everything's going well technically out there. Looks like it. So hi out there, YouTube. Yeah, if you want to get involved, you can ask your questions out there as well. I'm watching those the chat out there, and we have quite a few people in here as well. So you're all working on your stories, possibly for our story contest, right? And we're getting towards the finish line, so I don't know where you're at, but it's possible that you might be facing some issues. Hey, hello. I hear a hello coming from somewhere.
I'm just muting the other participants that are joining in now. So
I just wanted to be sure. It's like, hello. Yes, if you do have a question, you can feel free to chime in. Just let us know in the chat, and then we can unmute and we can let you participate. Or if you do not want to say it out loud, for whatever reason. Maybe you feel like you're better writing for some reason. I wonder why that would be the case. Anyway, if you feel better, it'd be better to write out your thoughts. Feel free to write out your thoughts and put them in the chat box as well. Ooh, I have an interesting question here from YouTube, and they say, is it better to do numbers in digits or numbers in words?
I remember some rules about that from like grammar
Yeah, I mean,
school.
there are different style guides you can follow based on what is typically done in like academic literature or news reporting and things like that. I would say just to go a little bit higher, I don't know, not higher level, but like kind of out of the box in terms of my thinking. My thinking is that spelling out numbers tends to feel less mathematic academic than putting in the digits in terms of less scientific. So I would say in terms of just how it hits me as a reader, for some reason when I see the numbers put in, like if I was reading a fantasy story, it might feel a little scientific for something like that. But it's really a stylistic thing, and I know there are people that have their official policies on it, and like I said, there are style guides around it. A common rule of thumb I've heard is like up to 100 you spell out, and then after 100 you might put in digits or things like that. But I mean, I've seen it done many different ways. So I think it's about that psychological impact on the reader. And I think generally putting in the numerals tends to come across a bit more scientific. But that's just my bias. Your mileage may vary on that. I like those very specific question. 12 miles reads different than 12 miles, so it depends on where it's used. Yes, that's true too. Clarity wise, it can be helpful to do it different ways as well. That's true. Good point. All right, so any other questions out there? We knocked that one out pretty easily.
Yeah, that was fun. That was so fun. I was thinking of the more higher, gosh, what help me with my words today, story doctor.
Like high digit numbers, like
Yes, thank
yeah, when you get
you.
to a certain point, then yeah,
A million
if
or a
you're saying
billion or
like
whatever.
1,732,596, spelling all that out is a mouthful. So that's
Mhm,
one reason
mhm.
why I know there are different standards. I thought up to 100 spelling out was pretty normal style guide, but I'm sure people will correct me. Correct me in the comments below.
Sure.
But I
Yeah,
thought that
yeah.
was a pretty common way of doing it. All right, cool question. I'm in the editing stage and I'm realizing one of my characters is kind of weak. How do I build a stronger character in the editing process?
Oh.
That's a good, well, the good thing is you've noticed that, right? And that's great. It's great. Now, in terms of why the character is kind of weak, it's a little bit hard for me to answer the question specifically towards your work without knowing why you think they're weak. But I can tell you certain things that tend to come up. One is when a character is put in and it's blatantly obvious to the audience that it's just serving a plot function and it's just mechanical, then the character can feel like a cardboard cutout that they're just in there to make things happen. How you adjust that is you give them a reason to exist that's outside of your story, and you kind of speak to that a little bit. That can help. Another thing is making sure that they represent a worldview that hasn't been reflected in the other characters, because then you're giving an extra bit of philosophy, a different point of view of the world, and you're enhancing the whole thing rather than them just be the person that serves that mechanical function. So that's a way. Another reason why they might be weak is maybe they're just a little bland, right? Maybe you're just not you haven't turned up the temperature on just how interesting they are. You're maybe worried about not getting too cartoony, and you've gone to the point where they're a little bit indistinct. So look for that. Look for anything that you can emphasize. I don't necessarily recommend, going totally crazy quirk wise, because that can end up distracting. But if you can't think of a distinctive characteristic that they have, try to give them one. And if they do have one, make sure you're exploiting it as much as you can. Make sure that you've given the audience all the fun. If it's a fun quirk, if it's a crippling quirk for the story, make sure you're really going there with it. You're not holding back. Especially if it's a secondary character, because you did say one of your characters, so I'm assuming it's a secondary character. And I know authors often are worried. They're like, well, if I make my secondary characters too interesting, then my protagonist is going to be overshadowed. And yes, that's true. It's like a double-edged sword, right? They have to be interesting, but not that interesting. So it is a hard balance, but you can go the opposite way where they're so uninteresting that they're just kind of a you know to use a video game term, they're NPC-ish. They're a non-playable character. They're just kind of roaming around, and they're like that person that's like, you need 20 coins to pass this bridge. So the
What a great
person
analogy
says
that was.
that they are a serial killer and a love interest to the protagonist, and the serial killer comes as kind of a surprise at the end.
Ooh,
Well, I would say that
not a banana
perhaps the
split, is it? Wait a
weakness, I would
minute.
say perhaps the weakness is because you want that to be a big twist, and that's an interesting characteristic. Perhaps you haven't given the character another interesting characteristic up to that point. And maybe you haven't, and maybe you haven't foreshadowed you to have in a way that keeps your interest in the character. Um, I mean, I can think of successful twists in terms of audience success, but not ones I've enjoyed so much. Like, I think of Hans and Frozen, where it's kind of a cheat to the audience, where all of a sudden from left field, he's like evil, and up to that point, he wasn't. And he was kind of bland up until that point, and that's kind of what makes him interesting. And I don't really think that's a great thing to model after. So if you're kind of in that sort of situation, then that might be the problem. It could be that either you're not foreshadowing enough that the person's going to be a serial killer, even if it's a surprise that they're a serial killer, that doesn't mean they can't be at all suspicious, right? Because that's quite an escalation from, well, that person rubs me the wrong way to, they're a serial killer. Um, but even if you want it to be a complete shock, okay, well, to some degree, making them really interesting in another way would make the shock land even more. If they're like really awesome at, I don't know, cake decorating or something, you wouldn't necessarily assume a cake decorator is a serial killer. Although I have no idea if there's any correlation between the two professions. I've never researched the topic. I don't think so. To all you cake decorators out there.
That's a quirk. I like it.
All
So
right.
while
Yes.
Daniel was talking here in the Zoom, we've had a couple of people ask, are there some more help documents, help videos, how-to videos on using the AutoCrit platform itself? The answer is yes. So I pasted a link in our Zoom chat. I'll go out to YouTube as well and post it there for our viewers out on the World Wide Web. Certainly tons of articles. We've got videos, we've got contextual help inside the app. And of course, if you ever get stuck in the app and just need a little bit of guidance, that little blue bubble in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you can click that anytime to reach support. We may not be 24 hours a day, but we're pretty darn close to it.
All right. Somebody says, when using a few words from a song in the name of the singer, how to display in the writing "We Are the Champions" by Queen. I am under the impression that you have to be very careful with such things because of copyright. As soon as you start writing in lyrics, that especially not that you should do this in, if you're just putting it out there, but especially for something you intend to sell, I believe that unless you have the permission, you can't even do so much as just like 3 or 4 words. Like they, it's not like, oh, it's so short. It's not like that. It's like any of it. Now, I think saying that they're listening to "We Are the Champions" by Queen, that's fine. But when you start typing in lyrics is where you're going to get the problem, because the lyrics are owned copyrighted material. Now, you might be like, well, I've seen books that do it. That's true, because they usually get permission. This is something that publishers will work with, ASCAP or BMI about, or things like that. And I know some people just chance it and figure, maybe they'll never notice. But it's technically, legally a no-no. Don't do it, I would say. All right. The main character's dad is not excited about his playing baseball. In the end, he is accepting. How do I get there? Um, Anytime you have characters where you have somebody who has to accept something that they don't initially like, there's kind of two methods that immediately come to mind. One is, if there's an obstacle between them accepting it, you can try to eliminate or rectify that. Like, if the main character's dad is not excited about playing baseball because he's worried about, I don't know, injury, or it's going to take too much time away from his other studies or things like that, then the main character can fix that, as it were. You can demonstrate to the dad, oh, it's really not all that dangerous, or I can do this and actually my grades are going to get better, or something like that. That's one objection people have as an obstacle. The other objection is just they can't relate to it, and so they reject it offhand because of that. And that's where you come up with, well, what does the main character's dad actually like? And you try to link that to baseball in some way, or at least have the other character be able to relate his passion to baseball in a way that the main character can link his passion to whatever he's passionate about, if that makes sense. So either or, those are two different ways that I can think of handling that. So either if the main character's dad has an obstacle that he's worried about and that's why he's anti it, figure out a way to remove the obstacle. Or if it's just I don't get it, figure out a way to make him understand the passion that the other character has. Is that the same for, this is about copyright again, is that the same for characters in Alma's movie? Like, if someone in the Halloween costume for a party dressed as It, Pennywise the Dancing Clown by Stephen King, Now I'm Nervous, you can reference the fact that somebody is dressed as a character from another movie in the context of it being a Halloween costume, because that's not you claiming they are that character, and the name is not like, you can reference names of things. Like, you could say they went to see Star Wars, they went to do this and that. Where you get into trouble is when you're verbatim copying text. So if you're quoting actual lines of dialogue, if you're quoting actual lyrics, that's where you'll run into problems. Now, some people, one of our people here on Zoom was talking about how they use specific locations without mentioning actual businesses. And one reason why is because you do always run some risk of somebody's feathers being ruffled. And if they can say that you've actually like damaged their company in some way or something like that, perhaps they can get onto you, even though it's fictional. I mean, I don't, I can see why people would do that, but there's an easy solution too, because what you can do the old kind of parody thing where it's like instead of the Pennywise clown, it's like, oh, he was dressed up like that Stephen Ruler's character, Dime Wise, the clown or something, and I've seen that done. Sometimes that's a little bit silly, but people do that for that reason because they're just worried about ruffling feathers, and everybody knows who they're actually talking about. Um, how do you use scriptures of the Bible? Do you have to use permission and from where? It would depend on the translation because there is copyright in certain translations because of when they're made. Although that gets hairy because obviously the original text of the Bible is, of course, public domain. It's very old. Moses isn't claiming copyright anymore, or whoever you think wrote it. But I would say for that, generally speaking, you're gonna be okay. Um, but I would try not to use like a super modern translation. I would probably stick to ones that are a little bit older, but there's also some that are out there that are public domain too. So just look it up, look and see if there's a lot of major copyright.
What an interesting question. I've never thought of that before.
Well,
Did you
I
think
mean,
about
there's some
reading stories where they're quoting
yeah,
scripture?
the King James, of course, is in public domain.
Oh, perfect.
But there's others too, like I don't even know if the New King James, if they really care that much about copyright and things like that. I can't remember who the Gideons use, if it's King James or not. But there's others like the Message, which is really like a paraphrase, and that's really like somebody's artistic work. So that's quite different. So I just don't want to give a blanket do whatever and then you do it and then you get a nasty gram from somebody, cease and desist order. Especially depending on how you use it, right? Because stuff like that people can use in subversive ways and you might ruffle some feathers. Let's see here.
So like PK's example about the paraphrasing and the parody-esque sort of rewording things, instead of there is the Yoda quote, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do or do not, there is no try. Just instead say something like, don't just try, do it. So I like that rewording, and it gives
Mm-hmm.
a similar vibe
Yeah.
without running afoul of any
I
copyright.
mean, I mean, I would be really shocked if anybody, even though it's in copyright, would be a problem with something like, frankly, my dear, I don't give a, because it's like, it's one of those things, it's such a trope now. I would find it, but I mean, technically speaking, they could get you for it if they really wanted to. So, stuff like that. It's tough. I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, Toto, stuff like that. Some of those are so tropey now that I don't know. And it's especially more easier to do if you're twisting it, right? So if somebody says, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, or whatever, freckle face or whatever, it's gonna be easier to get away with it because now you're tweaking it. And especially if you're providing commentary on it, then you get into fair use. So if somebody is like, I was listening to Let It Be from the Beatles. That song always made me mad because I think it's whatever. This lyric makes me think that it's about complacency or something. And if a character is quoting something in order to commentate on it, that's starting to get into fair use. So it's a fuzzy world, copyright. That's why a lot of people just avoid it altogether, because it really just it keeps you off of anybody's naughty list. But and you don't want to get that cease and desist order if you can avoid it, because that could be very frustrating. Somebody was saying, how often should they look for synonyms in their descriptions versus sticking with a good basic word that might get repetitive? For example, static versus distorted. That is a very good point, right? People, I talk about it, it's like Thesaurus Rex. It's like this big monster that comes through your book and it just starts shredding everything because we're like, people are gonna get bored. And this is where like said and asked, right? You know, people say you said and asked because it just disappears into the background and it's mechanical, and that's fine. So I would say it's kind of the same thing with synonyms of words, right? If you start repeating things a lot, it can kind of disappear into the background, which could be a good thing. There are times that it can come across like you are not very inventive with how you're phrasing things, which is a bad thing. And there are times that using a more specific word would improve your prose, get more across in less words, etc. So sometimes like that's not
Yeah, it depends.
that's really an authorial voice sort of thing. I mean, some authors deliberately like to limit their vocabulary for reasons. I mean, look at something like the Grapes of Wrath, which is more restrictive in its vocabulary on purpose, or like the Old Man and the Sea or something like that. It's a voice thing. I'll take sometimes. But no, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to be aware about, because then it should be a conscious choice. That's the thing. It should be a conscious choice. Even if it's just naturally how you write, and then you look back and you're like, I want to keep that. That's still a conscious choice to keep it. What you don't want to do is just be lackadaisical about that, and then you have a lot of repetitive words, and you didn't do it. You weren't doing it knowingly. It just happened. That's what you want to avoid.
When I encounter this, I like to think about the proximity of those words to one another. If I say static a few times in a row or very close together, that's going to be kind of disrupting the pattern for my readers. So thinking about how you could describe it differently, or maybe you don't need to re-describe it 3 or 4 times in such a short space. That would be a great rich area to think about some synonyms, or just shifting the description altogether. But over the span of a longer work, sometimes if it's not a very unusual word, then it just is fine. It doesn't feel repetitive. Then the converse of that is getting super creative and using the really uncommon words and things that don't really flow, where your reader may not get the right impact of what you're trying to really get across. So just
Yeah.
another 2 examples to support the answer of sometimes.
I will say too, in terms of repetitiveness, that multiple words often is going to be much more of a negative than a single word,
Great.
unless that single word is an unusual word. Like if a single word is normal, if it's like cup, and let's say there's a scene where, let's say mug, and there's a scene and it's like he picked his mug up of the shelf and his mug was super hot, and then he dropped his mug on the floor and it cracked. I wouldn't see a reason to be like, he picked his mug up, the drink receptacle was warm in his hands, and he dropped his chalice on the ground. Because it's like you're just talking about the same thing, and just getting overly clever with the noun doesn't benefit you, right? But I would say that if you're constantly referring to the old the old purple chip mug from his grandpa, and then like 2 chapters later, and it's like, and he pulled out the old purple chip mug from his grandpa, and then like if you just constantly refer to something like that, it's like going to be, is this important? Like, why are you that's your first idea, is like, oh, there's supposed to be something important. You keep saying it in the exact same way, and it's standing out, and so I'm really paying attention to this mug. And then it almost becomes like a Chekhov's gun, where you expect the mug to like matter in some way. And if it does, then that's great, you did a good job. If it doesn't, then you're just distracting your audience, because they're thinking, this is strange. They keep bringing unusual attention in the exact same way about something specific, and or another thing that happens a lot is in a visual description of a character, you'll just constantly refer to them in the same way. Their wavy black hair, their wavy black hair, and it just gets annoying because it's not necessary. So I would say when you get to the phrase level is where you have to look out for it a lot more than like the noun level.
Mhm. Totally agree. I love that repeated words and phrases report in AutoCrit because
Oh,
it,
here we go.
even
We've
when I
got a
stop and see like your 4-word phrases, those are the ones that are just
specific story question. I like these. All right, so we get a little
ooh, okay.
backstory. Semi-retired man accidentally electrocutes himself. That's like a huge fear of mine, so you got me already. And opens his full range of extreme psychic abilities. He senses a huge hostile fleet of aliens heading to Earth. He warns the major governments, and they're more worried about his abilities than the alien fleet. I like that. He can force the aliens to bypass Earth using his psychic powers. Then 6 major nations of Earth try to kill him with bombs and missiles all at the same time. And I guess that doesn't work. That's pretty freaky. He makes a secret deal with the aliens to have one of their mile-long ships for himself that he can use as an ark to leave the Earth on. Should send the aliens on their way or let them land. I had him send him away, but it does not finish him well. How can I not figure out how he can justify letting them? Oh, I cannot figure out how he can justify letting them land. Well, I could think of an easy justification. I mean, it doesn't seem like Earth is all that nice to him, right? They immediately just want to destroy him.
That's what I
So
was
perhaps
thinking.
the aliens are like, okay, guys, you can take care of my mess, and I'll just, I'll just sit here. Because it
That
almost
was
comes
my thought as
across
well.
like when I think of like a psychic character that everyone's like punishing, and then it's like a Carrie sort of story, right? It's like
Like
I'm
an
so
exorcist
sick of
character.
being bullied. Just come in, and at first he's warning them about them, and then ultimately he just switches sides, and he's like, all right, guys. You take care of it for me, and I'll just stand back and I'll watch all the fireworks.
I like
Depends on how nice you want your protagonist to be.
that.
Jerry's
I love an
Jerry's
edgy
like
protagonist, so I'm there.
rubbing his head. I don't know if that was a good answer for him. But also yes, insatiable curiosity. It's another thing. Maybe he's really curious about these aliens, right? Maybe he's not taking their side, but they're at least a viable alternative to these pesky humans that just want to obliterate him off the face of the earth.
Right?
Maybe
Or,
he can
maybe
solve both problems. Maybe he doesn't want the aliens to just wipe the floor with the humans, but at least they could be allies for some sort of change or something. I don't know.
I mean, twist, maybe he is the king of the aliens and he didn't know. And that was
Yeah,
really
maybe there's a reason why he has these
maybe
psychic
he's their
abilities,
ruler.
right?
Hmm?
Lots of different things. I like that. All right, here we have something else here. Da, 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 da. Hold on.
Just having a peek at the chats in YouTube. Oh, here we go. Lynn has one in Zoom.
Example.
Daniel, do you want to read the one from Lynn in Zoom, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I'm trying to parse it out. I written and edited my story ready for the 24th. Awesome. Using some
Mhm.
references to movies. Example, after watching The Frighteners, Doom said, oh no, did you hear that? Look over there, a dead homicidal killer in the shadows ready to pounce and add you to his body count any second now. There's going to be a blazing number on your forehead. Run now. Please tell me this is okay. I'll be honest, I don't know what you're referencing because I'm not familiar with The Frighteners, which I believe is the work you're talking about.
Mhm.
And so I don't know the depth of your reference to know whether or not I think that would be okay or not. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a tough one because I feel like it's not a direct quote, so we're not in running afoul there,
Uh-huh.
but certainly referencing the plot and the major points of the Frighteners. Ooh, that's a tough one.
I don't think that would be a problem. I don't think
So
there'd be
sure.
any issue with somebody being like, and he saw The Sixth Sense and within the first 10 seconds he realized the twist was X. I don't think that's an issue with copyright infringement
Yeah. So
because
yeah. So, so I think the
that's
answer is
like a
Lynn said, tell me this is okay or I'm gonna
synopsis. Yeah,
cry.
that's like yeah, you don't have to cry. I don't
Oh,
That's like a synopsis sort of thing. That's the same thing as like a movie critic telling you what happens in a story, which is not copyrighted material. That's just common because that's you distilling what happened. So that's
mhm.
different.
Yeah, I think it would be okay.
All right. My only reference in my time travel novel refers to an idea your friends Bill and Ted gave me. I don't know any Bill and Ted. Never mind, I'll explain later. Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's like an Easter egg. Easter eggs are a very different matter. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
I'm a fan of Easter eggs, and that that gets me. I like it.
Yeah. Especially
So fun.
because it's like you got the reference or you don't. And if somebody was like, well, you don't have the rights to use those characters, it's like, I'm not talking about them. There just happen to be people named Bill and Ted, okay? I wrote a shapeshifter's romance, first time tackling mythology and then adding romance to it, editing on AutoCrit, ready to submit, very excited. I'm excited. That sounds
Yeah.
like fun. And I do like the idea of going through your draft multiple times to focus on elements, right? And that's something I don't think enough people do because I think often people will think, oh, I can do everything at once. And, no, every edit, I really think it's better to focus on certain things. So the idea, if you're doing something that's across genre and you're like, okay, am I executing, the expectations of sci-fi? Oh, now am I executing the expectations of mystery? And then taking each edit like that. I think that works really well. Oh, somebody asked what an Easter egg is. I am sorry. That is a writerly term that is used for a reference to something or a joke that is a little bit hidden, hence the name Easter egg, like you have to go hunting for them. And so it's sometimes it's a complete inside joke that people outside the production wouldn't even know. So for example, if you hide your best friend in your book and you're like, Shirley's house and your best friend is named Shirley, essentially that's an Easter egg because it's for you yourself only. And maybe one day when you're rich and famous and going to Comic Con and doing a panel discussion, you can tell everybody, oh, by the way, Shirley's my best friend. Everyone will be like, ooh, that's insider information. But besides, that's the sort of Easter eggs. But other Easter eggs would be like, for example, reference to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure by just referencing Bill and Ted in as characters in a book or something like
I
that.
love that. And someone else in the Zoom chat said something like, uh, called them William and Edward. Theodore and William.
I did
It's just
not know
fun
this. This is
traveling
an
back to the
interesting
past.
fact. I wonder if this is true that it originated with Rocky Horror Picture Show. They literally had Easter eggs on the set.
Oh,
Interesting.
that's
I wonder if
fun.
that's true. I'm gonna look
Yeah,
that
I
up.
always see Easter eggs in like software programs. They're like little hidden features
Hmm.
or games that are hidden inside of Excel or something that you just don't even know are there. So it's a fun
Yes.
little thing to hunt for.
Right.
Yeah,
And
Android
I
operating
know
systems
people
love
that
that.
have hidden Easter eggs like to the point where it really is just an inside joke for themselves. Like they literally did think of a character as a character from another book that's just in the background of a scene, and so they write, and it's like this person is shopping for flowers, and they're like, but I know that's really Bruce Wayne, but nobody else is ever gonna figure it out. Yeah, I know people who have done that just to entertain themselves.
Look, if you can't have fun,
Yeah, exactly.
then what has it all been for?
Somebody said they switched into editing mode before the first draft was done. How do you recork the bottle? I feel like I'm forcing instead of creating. Yeah,
Mm,
there is a different headspace between writing and editing. And Stephen King calls it outrunning the tidal wave. You kind of want to, when you're really passionate about the idea, just start kind of spew ideas and be like, everything is great. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. It's so good. And then you get to the end, you're like, okay, what did I actually come up here? Because if you don't do that, you can end up in this analysis paralysis where every time you go to write a sentence, you're like, but wait, is this fulfilling this? Is this doing this? Is this filling this mechanical function? And for a lot of people, that can just paralyze them. What
mhm.
can help you, though, it depends on your personality type, but you could be somebody that is more of an outliner than a pantser, and that might be what you did is you pantsed, and then you started outlining as you were pantsing. And so what might help you is to actually outline it first, like that skeleton, and then you can go through and it maybe won't feel so much like you're forcing. I don't know. I'm just try different techniques.
Yeah,
Um,
I was thinking back to when we spoke with Ali Mashadi earlier this week. Boy, it seems like so long ago. But thinking about after you finished your draft, let it rest and then make an outline. You're
yeah,
kind of in that space, that in between space. So an
yeah,
outline, if you pantsed this puppy, make a quick outline and think
yeah.
about the parts that you're missing, right? If you're not done with the first draft, where do you want it to go? Outlining can absolutely help. PK says love plotter for that. Absolutely agree. It's just a way to step away from the editing part of it and get back to the story structure and the arcs itself. If you're doing it on a computer, I sometimes have to write it longhand or even do post-its or whatever you're doing. just to make even more separation between, my mind and the computer already know these parts of the story
Mm-hmm.
because I have part of a first draft. And I need to really get away from it
Yeah.
physically as well. So
Right.
doing maybe longhand, switching up to longhand instead of
Right.
writing on a computer is another kind of mental trick you can try.
Yeah, another thing that you can just do is just don't allow yourself to edit. And one thing that can help with that, I know people have done. My wife has done this before. Is use a really ugly font that's really hard to read. So as you're typing it, you actually can't really see what you've done up to that point, or it doesn't look like a book. So like people use something like a Comic Sans type thing, like something that doesn't resemble like a book and maybe is a little bit challenging to read. It's not the kind of typeface you would ever use for a book, and just type like that. And so that way you can kind of see the shape of what you're doing, but unless you really pay attention, it's just kind of not hitting you. Does that make sense? And so, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily go like wingdings route that level because, but I mean, I know people that have done things like that because it's just like they're just trying to never look back. It just forces you to not look at what you're writing up to that point, and so you're just constantly moving forward. Old
Old
English,
English,
all
all
caps. Oh, see, I'm a graphic designer, and I'm like, oh, just talking about this makes me uncomfortable. Comic Sans, woo!
oh, Daniel.
Yeah, Gareth needs to tell me what the phobia is for Comic Sans or ugly fonts. Like, there must be some
There's
psychological
got to
thing.
be a name for
I have
that.
literally walked out of a restaurant before because I did not like their font choices on a menu, and I'm not
You're
kidding.
so fun.
So I'm like, if
Fun
they're
fact.
this bad at graphic design, their food must be awful, which of course makes no
Hey, if
sense.
anybody's still looking for a character's work, I think we have a few examples now.
Oh, somebody look at this. They say they use a font called Sans for Getico, which is broken up to make your brain think. I didn't even know of this. See? That's awesome.
Whoa, Sans for
And they
Gattaca.
change the font size with every edit. Yeah. The idea is to just not let yourself look back if you have that problem. Because yeah, you can get that point and you keep editing and then you write and then you keep editing and then you just never get anywhere. And it's not helpful. My story is first person POV, starts and ends in the present, but almost all the rest in past. I have a present tense bit in the middle, but people don't get the shift. Any ideas?
Hmm.
Well, I'm
Something
confused as you say it starts and ends in the present, and then the rest of it is in the past. Oh no, I have and I think I need a present tense bit in the middle, but people don't get the shift. Any ideas? I am wondering why you think you need that shift in the middle. What are
I have
you
the same question.
what are you gaining by it? Obviously, present tense gives you that sense of urgency, that immediacy, but if it's so distracting that people are just being pulled to the pros, what are you gaining by it? If you think about it in like other terms, it would be like, all of a sudden I just randomly uh switch to like black and white or something. I mean, just imagine it would be like whoop, you know, wait, I was gonna do it all clever. I can't. Wait, here we go. Be like whoop, see, and it's like and then all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, look, now I'm in color again. And why did I
You're
do
in
that? You know
history.
what I
You're
mean?
in
But
color.
if I
Yeah,
had a reason for it, then, and I bet there is a reason mechanically why it happens, but just realize you're really distracting. And that might not be what you want to do. It may not be worthwhile.
mhm.
I don't know. This might
The
be
other
one of those darlings that you have to kill. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Bruce. But I mean,
true.
if you're getting
That's
a lot of
true.
consistent feedback from your readers, I don't know. I mean, I haven't read it myself, but that could be a sign that, yeah, you just may need to let that one go. And there
Yeah.
might be a way, if you're concerned about it seeming not urgent enough, not exciting enough or something, that maybe there's still a way to do that and keep your tense, which I'm sure there is. It's not like only present tense books have that sort of urgency, right? If that's what you're going for. So. All right. Well, I think those are some good questions there. All right, here we go. So a little bit more explanation. Spoiler. He's on a. Okay, wait. Shh. If you want to read Bruce's story. Okay. Spoiler. He's on a subway platform. Train is late. At the end, he jumps. The middle explains why. I want to hit the tension of the present bit partway through. Yeah, I
Oh,
can understand what you're saying. So you're like your idea is that immediately you like jump into the headspace of the character. Could you I wonder if maybe you're presenting it. Maybe is it like in one of those things where you're jumping in the headspace into what they're thinking? Because what they're thinking is often in present tense. Well, it's pretty much always in present tense when somebody's thinking. If you put it in italics, it's like, I need to pick up some milk, he thought, right? And I need to pick up some milk is present tense. Hopefully that's not the reason he's jumping in front of a subway train, but that's just the first thing that came to my mind. um, but sorry, rabbit trail. But I would say maybe I don't know what you're doing, but maybe try like italicizing, move it so it's like clear it's in the headspace if that's what you're getting
mhm.
at.
I was thinking the same thing visually. Making a more clear indication may help your readers grasp that, whether it's, scene break indications, little rows, hashtags or asterisks or whatever,
Hmm.
putting it in italics, making it really short and italicized with those scene breaks above and below
Right,
may help will help visually anchor your reader in, hey, something's different here, something's
right.
changing,
Because
and this is
it
important thing that we're going to
depends.
go back.
It depends on one of two problems. Is the problem that people think you're goofing up and you just forgot what tense you're in because it's not clear to them that it was intentional, which is a problem, right? It would be like, all of a sudden I go black and white and you're like, is there something wrong with this computer? Because you're not sure that I did that on purpose. You don't want that reaction. And that could be some of the reaction you're getting is they're not even sure if this was intentional. So by making sure it's clear it's intentional would help. But even then, it could be a problem that even if they know it's intentional, it'll just be so jarring that they're like, yeah, that was kind of gimmicky, buddy. I'm not sure if that's my favorite author choice. So anyway. So somebody said my short story came from an obscure reference in my novel. Consequently, I couldn't use the dialogue referring to the flashback. It deserved its own standalone story. No reference to thinking about in the future. It will now be in a more prominent space earlier in the work. The story is that good. I love the end. I love that confidence. That's great. I'm so sick of
This is worth it
these
and it
wimpy
deserves
authors that
more.
are like, I don't know if my work is good enough. Now, yes, my work is good enough. I like that. My type of person. Um, Bruce says, anywhere I shall persevere. I'm sorry. I hope I wasn't beating you up too badly there. Oh, no, they miss it on first reading, then realize it
Mm,
afterwards that you did that. Oh, okay. So what you're saying is that you did an authorial choice that you thought was going to be jarring. So I was like completely missing the boat. I'm sorry. You were doing an authorial choice that you thought was jarring to make a artistic statement and they missed it. In that case, I'm not really all that worried about it because that means really savvy people will catch on to it. It's like subtext or something. And, the people that are more in tune, or if they read it multiple times, they'll be like, I see how they did
ooh,
that.
yeah,
And that's
yeah.
that's a lot of writing. A lot of writing is that smoke and
Hmm.
mirrors, and some
Hmm.
of it's really obvious, but some of it's you're making obvious because you're doing subtle things you don't want the people to know about. And if they caught on to you, they would be like, oh, I'm getting manipulated. And you're like, aha, you think you're getting manipulated, but I'm manipulating you this way. Or maybe most people are not maniacal puppet masters like I am. I don't know. Anyway, so I love talking to everybody. We will be continuing to do story doctors on this YouTube channel. So if you've enjoyed this and you're not usually here for these, then subscribe, hit the bell, be involved. If you want to get updates too, if you're an AutoCrit member, which of course you should be, you can join our community and it'll be part of our events calendar as well. Otherwise, we are in the midst of that writing challenge that people keep referencing. Beth, do you have any details about the writing challenge that you would like to share with all the folks at home?
I do. I do. Normally I have my printed calendar, but I have to be honest, the cat spilled something on it and now it's a mess.
The dog
So
ate your homework? Is that really what
the
you're going with?
cat spilled something on my homework. Yes. So what we have coming up is 2 full days, Saturday and Sunday, of just do the work day. It's time to dive into that editing, time to do your final polishes, final updates to your short story if you choose to submit it for possible inclusion in our trophy anthology. Then on Monday is submission day, Monday, May 24th, 2021, in case anyone's watching this way in the future.
Remember
That's our
that.
submission day. Details will be coming to you via email on how, when, where, formatting, all of that jazz. how to submit. And then we'll also have a 1-hour Q&A on Monday the 24th that will answer any other questions that you may have on wrapping up that challenge. And then, of course, the most fun part, the celebration, prize drawings, getting everybody jazzed and congratulating ourselves on completing this wonderful challenge will be on Tuesday, May 25th.
Do we get?
We get formatting criteria before we need to submit. Yes. Sorry, I'm in the haunted office. The cat just made herself home here. And the haunted office strikes again. So yes, typically the general guidelines for formatting will be, times basic manuscript formatting. So think about, 1-inch margins and double spacing or space and a half. And the Q&A Tuesday will also be at 1 p.m. The celebration and prize draws. You do not have to be present to win, but we would love to see your faces there. Chuck says, will the Q&A be before we need to submit our work? Yes. So the Q&A is at 1 o'clock, and that submission is going to stay open for hours and hours and hours after that.
It closes at 10:04 and 37 seconds. Just because I said so.
Because random. Yeah. And that the email, the information about formatting and how to submit and stuff like that, I believe might be coming out I believe it might come out on Sunday via email. But as soon as we have that information, we'll share that. And I'll work with Gareth, who is our gatekeeper for the submissions. I'll work with him to see if we can get some general formatting criteria. I can pull that out and post that in our communities for you as well. But generally speaking, we're pretty flexible. It's standard manuscripting stuff.
Yeah.
Word doc would be preferable, a docx or .doc, or a text file if you want to go that route. Just please don't send PDFs.
I mean, WordPerfect, whatever you got.
Word processing, doc links.
Yeah. I have some old WordPerfect files. It's actually some old books that I wrote in WordPerfect that are sitting on a floppy disk, and I still have them, and I really want to recover them because I'm sure they're awful because I wrote them when I was a little kid. Although it'd be fun to read, but I need to figure out. There must be some source to get that taken care of. Because obviously, not only do I need a thing to remaster these WordPerfect files, but I figure out a way to get a 3.5 floppy connected to my computer. So yeah, it's like an archaeological expedition.
That would be so much fun. I would love to read what Baby Daniel wrote as a kid.
It was fun. I wrote a lot of fan fiction, and it was like seaQuest, DSV, and I was a nerd.
I love it. A quick final question from Anne. Tuesday, the 1 p.m. Yes, will be on YouTube. So we won't have to worry about people who can't or won't be able to get connected on Zoom. YouTube is going to be our broadcasting platform for that on Tuesday.
All right, sounds good.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everybody. You have a great day. Enjoy your work weekend.